Gallagher was born to Daniel and Monica Gallagher in Ballyshannon, County Donegal, Ireland, in 1948. His father was employed by the Irish Electricity Supply Board, who were constructing Kathleen's Fall hydroelectric power station on the Erne River above the town. He played the accordion and sang with the Tír Chonail Sailey Band in County Donegal. His mother sang and acted with the Abbey Players in Ballyshannon. The main theatre of the Abbey Arts Centre where she used to perform was renamed the Rory Gallagher Theatre in 2005. In 1949, the family moved to Derry City, where Gallagher's younger brother Donal was born later that year. Donal would act as Gallagher's manager throughout most of his career. In 1956, Gallagher, his mother and his brother moved to Cork, where Gallagher attended North Monastery School. Gallagher displayed musical aptitude at an early age. He taught himself how to play the ukulele, and received a guitar from his parents at age 9. He began performing at minor functions and won a cash prize in a talent contest when he was 12 that he used to buy a new guitar. 3 years later, in 1963, he purchased a 1961 Fender Stratocaster for £100. This guitar became his primary instrument and was most associated with him during his career. Gallagher was initially attracted to skiffle after hearing Lonnie Donegan on the radio. Donegan frequently covered blues and folk performers from the United States. He relied entirely on radio programs and television. Occasionally, the BBC would play some blues numbers, and he slowly found some songbooks for guitar where he found the names of the actual composers of blues pieces. While still in school playing songs by Buddy Holly and Eddie Cochran, he discovered his greatest influence in Muddy Waters. He began experimenting with folk, blues, and rock music. Unable to find or afford record albums, Gallagher stayed up late to hear Radio Luxembourg and AFN, where the radio brought him his only exposure to the actual songwriters and musicians whose music moved him most. Influences he discovered and cited as he progressed included Woody Guthrie, Big Bill Broonzy, and Lead Belly. Singing and later using a brace for his harmonica, Gallagher taught himself to play slide guitar. Further, throughout the next few years of his musical development, Gallagher began learning to play alto saxophone, bass, mandolin, banjo, and the choral electric sitar, with varying degrees of proficiency. By his mid-teens, he began experimenting heavily with different blues styles. Gallagher began playing after school with Irish show bands while still a young teenager. In 1963, he joined one named Fontana, a sextet playing the popular hit songs of the day. The band toured Ireland and the United Kingdom, and earning the money for the payments that were due on his Stratocaster guitar. Gallagher began to influence the band's repertoire, beginning its transition from mainstream pop music skirting along some of Chuck Berry's songs, and by 1965 he had successfully molded Fontana into the Impact, with a change in their lineup into an R&B group that played gigs in Ireland and Spain until disbanding in London. Gallagher left with the bassist Oliver Tobin and drummer Johnny Campbell to perform as a trio in Hamburg, Germany. In 1966, Gallagher returned to Ireland and, experimenting with other musicians in Cork, decided to form his own band. Having completed a musical apprenticeship in the show bands and influenced by the increasing popularity of beat groups during the early 1960s, Gallagher formed The Taste, which was later renamed simply Taste, a blues, rock, and R&B power trio in 1966. Initially, the band was composed of Gallagher and two Cork musicians, Eric Kitteringham and Norman Damery. However, by 1968, they were replaced with two musicians from Belfast, featuring Gallagher on guitar and vocals, drummer John Wilson and bassist Richard McCracken. Performing extensively in the UK, the group played regularly at the Marquee Club, supporting both Cream at their Royal Albert Hall farewell concert and the blues supergroup Blind Faith on a tour of North America. Managed by Eddie Kennedy, the trio released the albums Taste and On the Boards, and two live recordings, Live Taste and Live at the Isle of Wight. The band broke up shortly after their appearance at the 1970 Isle of Wight Festival, and the live album from the festival was released a year later. Creative differences and an issue with management led to the band breaking up, with Gallagher stating that "We just came to the end of our natural life. The drummer wanted to play jazz, and I wanted to play blues. We also had management problems that went on to cause me terrible legal hassles. I couldn't play for 6 months after Taste split up because of the contract I was under." In a later interview in 1977, he was more forthright. "Everything went amicably. But I did want to get rid of my manager, a real bastard. That is when he passed on all those stories to defame me. Rory Gallagher's brother Donald, who took on the role of his manager, insisted they bring his previous manager Eddie Kennedy to court to recoup royalty payments. The episode made Gallagher reluctant to seek out big management deals in future, and he later turned down an approach from Led Zeppelin's manager Peter Grant. Towards the end of the band's existence, relations were strained. Wilson refused to go back on stage for an encore at a gig in Glasgow, and Gallagher claims they were not talking to each other at the Isle of Wight festival. They played their final gig together around Christmas 1970. After the breakup of Taste, Gallagher toured under his own name, hiring former Deep Joy bass player Jerry McAvoy to play on Gallagher's self-titled debut album. It was the beginning of a 20-year musical relationship between Gallagher and McAvoy. The other band member was drummer Wilgar Campbell. The 1970s were Gallagher's most prolific period. He produced 10 albums in that decade, including 2 live albums live in Europe and Irish Tour 74. November 1971 saw the release of the album Deuce. In 1972, he was voted Melody Maker's Guitarist Musician of the Year. However, despite a number of his albums from this period reaching the UK Albums Chart, Gallagher did not attain major star status. In short, Gallagher collaborated with Jerry Lee Lewis and Muddy Waters on their respective London sessions in the mid-1970s. He played on Lonnie Donegan's 1978 album Puttin' on the Style. In the 1980s, he continued recording, producing Jinx, Defender, and Fresh Evidence. After Fresh Evidence, he embarked on a tour of the United States. In addition, he played with Box of Frogs, a band formed in 1983 by former members of the Yardbirds. Becoming obsessive over details and plagued by self-doubt, Gallagher nevertheless retained a loyal fanbase. Notes from San Francisco, an album of unreleased studio tracks, and a San Francisco 1979 concert was released in May 2011.